Sure.
Yeah.
So, I guess the first question I'm curious about is what other alternative solutions did you guys consider, and are there any engineering project studies that show the trade-offs in those solutions?
So that wasn't really something that we were tasked with doing. So the way that these projects kind of work is that the governing electric body comes to us with a problem. You know, they're like, hey, this is our problem. This is what we want to do. What can you offer us as a solution, right? So this is what we offered them, and this is what they've sort of decided. PJM is really what kind of dictates that. PJM being the governing electric body, like here in West Virginia, Maryland, all that area.
So you're not aware of any studies that were done to look at potential generation increases on the end where the main need is at?
Not anything that I'm aware of. Again, that would have been something that PJM would have asked other companies to kind of look into. I don't know if they did. I don't know if they didn't. All I know is that they asked us to design something to generate or to transport it from the coal mine all the way over to Maryland, Virginia. I can't remember what the final destination is off the top of my head.
And so how was the route selected that goes through West Virginia?
Yeah, so the route is kind of selected based off of a lot of there was a sign that had something about this, but we use a lot of publicly accessible information regarding, you know, already existing power lines, you know, highways, soil conditions and things like that to get a kind of guesstimate as to where we think these all could go. Kind of a preference is always to put it right next to another power line that already exists, but so that's step one. That's where we got all of the different route kind of selections so far. Step two is going to be, once we get all of the feedback from these community events, we're going to then go through, reconsider our line routes, and then we're going to start doing like more technical studies, taking like actual ground samples, LiDARs, things like that, and we're just going to try and keep narrowing it from that.
Was the private land use versus public land use considered in that route selection at all?
It was. Kind of a big constraint is just the national forest that's in the area, you know. Big consideration there. We want to try and affect that the least as possible.
So when the construction happens, if it happens, how are you guys going to manage individual landowner rights as you work your way through properties?
Yeah, that's going to be a right-of-way question. I'm more so just kind of like with the initial like engineering of it, kind of how we're kind of doing this, what we need to do to make sure that we can build it safely and engineer it safely. Like I said, using the publicly accessible data for like soil conditions, bedrock like depths and things like that. Those are going to be huge for what actually ends up happening.
One of the problems that's been reported with these high voltage transmission lines, and I've actually seen it myself. I've been in areas before where there are a lot of 500 kV lines.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of noise associated with those lines. These have to be a lot worse than the 500 kV lines. What engineering solutions are you looking at to suppress that noise to keep the level of impact on the environment?
Yeah. These towers are held to the same standard as the 500 kV ones. So we have to follow the NESC standards, we have to follow the IEC and IEEE standards. That's already something that we've taken into consideration. One of the biggest things that sort of helps with that is just the tower height, you know. Sound has to travel farther distances. So at the base, you'll have ideally the same as the 500 kV. There's going to be slight variations based off of altitude, you know, weather conditions and things like that. But it is something that should be standard across the board.
What about EMF?
EMF?
Both health risks associated with EMF and interference with other systems.
Yeah. I am not personally aware of any of the studies or things like that regarding the EMF. We have our EMF study section over there. They would be more helpful to get to the
Is there a tower design that's already been selected, or do you just have all these out because any of them could be the...
Yeah, any of them could be selected. Each one of them has a use case, which is why we have them. So there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to this. We have to take into consideration So if we have structures that are just going to be like one after the other in more or less a straight line, we can use something like this structure or that structure right there, which are a little shorter. They don't have to take as much of a load. The structure right here, it looks bigger, bulkier, heftier. That we're going to use for like higher strain locations. So if we have to make like a sharper turn, you want to have something stronger there just to be able to take that load. If we're going to have a larger span between valleys, we're going to want something stronger to make sure we can hold up all of the wire and the equipment that would have to go in on it. And specifically for like the guide foundation ones, those would be for more like hillside where we're not going to have the footprint needed for a structure like this.
So that looks like it has a pretty large footprint. How does that impact the landowner's use of the land after you guys have come through?
So that's going to be a right-of-way question. Depending on what the land is used for, there might be some restrictions. I know somebody asked me a logging question earlier. I wish I could have an answer for it, but not something I'm overly familiar with as far as land uses after the construction.
What benefit is this going to bring to West Virginia?
It will allow the connection to the power once the lines are built. So if manufacturing wants to come in, or power is needed somewhere in West Virginia, a substation can be built. You can tap into the existing power lines, and then that way it can help benefit. But right now, the main customer is most certainly just going to be out in Virginia, Maryland. I wish I could remember where the city was.
And how does the cost for all this get apportioned?
That is not something I am aware of. I know it goes into the rate base somehow. As far as how that happens, I don't have an answer for you. Actually, her in the green shirt right there, she would be better for that question.